The Powers Project.
Ian, how are you, sir?
I am extraordinarily well, thank you. It's a beautiful day where I am in a great part of the world, so all is good, thank you.
I imagine that you're doing quite well. You're in France right now, right?
Yeah, I'm just coming to the end of a writing week in southern France, so
Oh,
it's a
right.
hard life.
So, so why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Let them know who you are and what you do, and then we'll go in from there. Okay.
Sure. So I guess for the last 25 years, I would have described myself as a husband. For the most of the last 25 years, I've described myself as a father. For all of that time, I would say I was an HR guy. For the last 8 years, a business owner, on and off, but increasingly a world traveler. And for the last year or so, an author. So I've gone through various stages, but these days I describe myself primarily as a travel author.
A travel author. Now, I can tell you there are many, many people out there who go, I want that job. And so when you and I talked to meet each other, you said something that I don't even know if you realized the importance of what you said, but I picked up on it right away. And you said that this is a life by design. And I was like, wow, what a powerful, because I think people think, oh, I want to do this, and but they don't understand that it takes, it takes something on your part to make that happen. It doesn't just happen because you wish it. And I think many people want what you do, but few are willing to do what it takes to get there. So for those who are, like, what was your design? Like, how did you go from being an HR guy to someone who traveled the world with his family?
Okay, I think it's a combination of serendipity. We all need a bit of luck and just things happening for us mystically, uh, together with intent. And I was listening, funny enough, in preparation for our chat today, Kurt. I was listening to a recording you did recently with a guy, you'll know his name, but it was about finding your why.
Right.
And yeah,
Stephen
great
Gillette.
podcast. Enjoyed, yeah, that's it. Enjoyed listening to it. And I think knowing your why is really, really important. And I'm clear on mine. And, my business is all about making a difference to people's lives. But also you need to know what your passion is. And my passion is travel for all sorts of reasons. So serendipity, I guess, got me to the point and got my wife to the point where 3 years ago we were in the departures lounge of the domestic terminal at Ho Chi Minh Airport, Saigon Airport in Vietnam. And we were working with a lifestyle financial planner. And he'd set us some homework, which we had to do independently. And it was 3 questions, easy little questions. Number one, what would you like from the rest of your life? So that's a nice, easy one. Secondly, bad news, you've got 5 to 10 years to live, but they're good years. What would you do? And the third question was really bad news. You've got 24 hours. What would you do and how do you feel? Right. So we sat down, having given this some thought and chatted around our travel aspirations and life aspirations for the first few days of our Vietnam trip. And we wrote down what we wanted. And I described the rest of my life as a series of chapters. And the first chapter was about getting from where we were then to the point where the business would work without me and I was free to travel. Chapter 2 was exactly what I'm doing now, which is, yes, I still own a business. That business funds my life, funds my future life and my retirement as well, but gives me the freedom and the flexibility to, with my wife, to travel, rest, repeat, and write about that along the way. And then obviously there's the stuff that you do when you're too old to do that and you settle down and play with the grandkids and have an allotment and whatever else. And then the final stage, which I describe as being an old man in a rocking chair, in a nappy, looking back at the memories that have been accumulated for as long as I can remember them. And that'll be the fourth and final chapter of my life. So clarity about the why, the passion, and then working out the how, I guess, is how I've got to where I am now.
Very nice. So all right, so when you start, all right, first off, before I get into your story, you you were an HR person. Now you have your own business. What kind of business do you do?
So it's an outsourcing business that provides HR and health and safety to small businesses in the
Okay.
UK. So small in Scotland, small businesses that typically wouldn't have their own function because they're not big enough. They've maybe got 10, 20 employees. So they get us to basically provide them with that expertise and support.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're from Edinburgh in Scotland, and not that I've been there yet, but I understand it's quite the beautiful place itself. Would that be correct?
It's a beautiful, historic city. And I've been fortunate to live there now for 20 years. So if any of your listeners are familiar with a Scottish accent, this isn't one. Um, this is an English accent, but I don't sound like you and Bremner. But I met a Scottish lady many moons ago, and we moved back up there to make that our home. And it's been a fantastic place to base our life, build a business, and raise a family. But the route in Scotland that we know the best is from our front door to Edinburgh Airport, because that's what we keep doing. So that and planting trees balances out.
Okay, so when you decided to take this monumental risk and you decided, like, I'm going to travel the world with my families. Now, if you can set up the time when you start, like when you decided to do this, because for your kids to be as young as they were, this must have been, right before the recession hit and stuff. And talk about your kids. You have two kids, a son and a daughter, and you must have had to um, homeschool them as you're traveling around the world, since they wouldn't be able to be in school. So talk about that a little, if you would.
Yeah, sure. So it's we go back to 2007. So as you say, right before the crash, but before we knew it was going to happen.
Right.
I'd never heard of Lehman Brothers, and to be honest, if I had, I'm not sure everything that flown from there would have happened. So thank goodness we didn't know. So we're on a family holiday in southern Turkey. We're in a bar one evening. I say to the kids, "Where would you like to go next?" Expecting them to say, "Can we come back here?" or something like that. But they didn't. They said very cleverly, they said, "Daddy, can we have a think about that and come back to you?" And the next night they came back and they pulled out a list. And on this list were 10 countries, and pretty much animal based. China pandas, Australia kangaroos, if they have the animals next to it, Madagascar lemurs, Peru llamas, all that sort of stuff. And we just looked at it and thought, wow, that looks amazing. We'd quite fancy that ourselves. So it ended up being what we did. And I quit my job. I was a reasonably well-paid, secure HR director in the state sector. I quit that. My wife was on a 0 hours contract. We completed the academic school year because this was in kind of the fall, and we obviously needed to get them through the school year. So we pulled them out at the end of June. They skipped a year's school, and we took them out on the road. And people say to me sometimes, "How did you educate them?" The world educated them. The world was their classroom. They were, I think, and people take their kids traveling at different ages, but there are other crazy people out there that do this as well. Some do it with younger kids. And I take my hat off to those people because they've got to carry around all the
Right.
paraphernalia that comes with babies and toddlers. And, I'm not sure how much those kids remember of that experience. I sometimes wonder how much those parents remember because they must be so sleep deprived, but they do it, and full marks to them. Other people maybe do it when the kids are a bit older. For me, that means hormones, and it means school curriculum and exams and all the rest of it. So I thought 8 and 10 was ideal. They could read, they could write, they could assimilate, and biology, geology, geography, history, languages, English, maths, etc. Those lessons all took place on the ground as we were traveling because it was all there.
Yeah, I can only imagine that's a world class education that they must have received, like unlike anything that you could ever just receive in a classroom. You talked about your son Rory, for instance, in your book. Are we there yet? Appropriately titled. I'm sure you
Well,
heard that more than
this
that book
one.
right there. I was thinking there couldn't be a better title for someone who's traveling who has kids. So, you talk about Rory taking over the finances. And I thought, wow, that's the way kids should really be taught math, because not only does it teach them, the basics of adding and subtracting and multiplying and division and all that, but it teaches them the value of a dollar or a pound, or I don't know, it's in Scotland.
It's like, yeah, it's pounds.
A pound. Yeah. But it teaches them the value of money and going, okay, we know that this is how much we have, and it can only go so far. So you can't just keep spending when you run out of it. So I thought, well, how, what a wonderful idea to teach your kids how to, math in that way and learn the value of money as well.
Yes, it generally worked, Kurt. Occasionally I regretted it, and I mentioned this in the book. So, so one of Rory's jobs was to add up what we spent during the course of the day, and then to compare that to the budget that we'd set for that day, which would vary depending upon the country. Because obviously, different countries have different value on money, different things are more expensive. So there would be occasions when we get to the end of the day and I'd quite fancy a beer, and Rory would go, not happening. We've overspent. You can't have one, Dad. So hoisted by my own petard, as the French would say. But yeah, it was a good lesson. And also, I mean, one of the beauties about doing it when we did was, I mean, it's not that long ago, but goodness me, how technology has moved on in that time. So even something like currency conversion, I'd get him to do that. And the little apps that we have now, they didn't exist back then. So he'd work out how to convert whatever, the South African rand into pounds, and then put that into our spreadsheet and see how we were doing.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was good. It's a good lesson for him.
And
I did regret it.
I would imagine geography was like none other. Again, it's hard to to see something on the map and get a better idea of it than when you're actually in that country and experiencing it and then know exactly where in the world you are.
Absolutely. Oh, they're good in a pub quiz, my kids. They've got a lot of knowledge about flags and where countries are. I mean, Rory has. I'm up at. There's a thing called I think it's called the Century Club. So it's you go to this website and it lists all the countries and territories in the world, and the aim is to get to 100. And so I'm at 71. Rory's only 10 behind me, and he's only 24. So through that, inevitably, he's built up a pretty decent knowledge of the world. And try and catch him out on flags. You'll be lucky.
So when you guys decided to do this, to take this adventure, where was the first place you guys went?
So I mentioned South Africa. That's where we started.
That's where you started.
That's where we started. Funnily enough, I've just before we came on this podcast, I was asked to name the person who's been the biggest influence on me in my life. And sometimes I say my grandfather, but more often than not, I say Nelson Mandela. And when you think about Nelson, why would someone say, the person who's had the biggest influence on me is Nelson Mandela? Well, it'd be the usual reasons about his leadership and the impact he had on that country and history. But actually, for me, it's more personal than that, because when I was a student back in the 80s, yes, I'm old enough, the anti-apartheid movement and the ANC, that was my cause. I was at Wembley Stadium in London in June 1988 for Nelson Mandela's 70th birthday tribute concert, when the world hadn't seen him for a quarter of a century. And we didn't know who he was, and little Stephen was leading everybody in singing Sun City. And I remember all of that. So following his release and being back at Wembley Stadium just 2 years later, to have him and Winnie on stage made a big impression on me. And then in 2003, I had the opportunity to go to South Africa on a charity hike. So my mother-in-law had ended up in terminal cancer, and I did a hike to support a charity that was supporting her. And that was the first time I'd been to South Africa, which I would not have been able to do if Mandela hadn't been freed and become president. So it was very logical to me that South Africa was where I emotionally would want to start. But I also believe in bookends. It's just something about bookends that fascinates me. So that also influenced the route that we took. So we started in a famous city with an iconic mountain by the ocean. And we finished a year later in a famous city with an iconic mountain by the ocean. Do you know where that was? You can actually draw a straight line across the ocean and get there. There's no land in between.
Rio?
Yes. Well done. Yeah.
I was going to say, if you went all the way, like basically around, you'd be Brazil. So.
Well done. Yeah. So yeah, South Africa was a great place to start, and Rio certainly was a good place to finish.
So, all right. So here you have South Africa and you have Rio, two completely different cultures. I mean, I don't know if you could get more different than what they are. What was that like going, like, as you're traveling around the world with your kids and going and seeing these different countries and experiencing these different cultures? I mean, I don't know if that's even a great question. What was it like? But I can only imagine it would be overwhelming at times.
It's almost hard to answer that question, if that makes sense.
Right.
But let me try by explaining what it felt like to travel to 20 different countries, staying an average of 3.5 nights in each place. And yes, it was overwhelming and certainly exhausting at times,
right,
but infinitely fascinating, because in one sense, everywhere is different. But in another sense, we're all human beings living on the same planet. We've all got history, we've all got wildlife, we've all got culture, we've all got language. And you start to see not just the differences, but the similarities as well. And in Thailand, they have a saying, same, but different, which I might use as the title for one of the follow-up books. Actually, it's not going to be the next one, but I've got it in there as a great title for a book. And that's what we started to do, was to compare things. And yes, we might be in Ecuador, but actually we're seeing things that are very similar to something we observed in Madagascar, for example, other side of the world. And it was quite fun teasing that out and trying to get under the skin of places, which can be hard when you just keep moving. It can be hard on holiday sometimes to really understand the place and the culture. But one thing that happens with family travel, which I'm trying, as we now are doing adult-only travel, I'm trying to really work on, is kids open doors to experiences that might not otherwise be opened. So, for example, in Madagascar, which was only on the list because of lemurs, we went to a ring-tailed lemur reserve. So this was a place that they used to hunt the lemurs. And then one guy went, hold on a minute, we could actually make more money. We're going to hunt these things out of existence. Or if we look after them, we'll get the tourist dollar in and we'll make more money. So that's what he persuaded the locals to do. So we go at lunchtime, we do the tour, we get to hand feed wild ring-tailed lemurs with bananas, which was the most special experience. But then he said, do you want to come back at dusk? Just you guys, the park is closed. Do you want to come back with your children and see the lemurs again? Well, of course, the answer is yes. And as the sun set, over this Madagascan landscape with lemurs settling down for the night on rocks. It was just the most special experience.
Wow.
And it wouldn't have happened if we hadn't have had the kids.
Right.
So yeah, I'm trying to find ways to recreate that now. Volunteering seems to be a good way, actually, but yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So let me ask you this, because I know when I travel, I go off the beaten path. I don't go where the tourists are. I don't go where them, especially Americans are. I try to stay away from them as much as possible because I want to experience that country. I want to experience that city. I want to experience those people. I want to talk to them one on one. I want to go where they go, and not just not just the tourist spots. I would imagine with kids that would be a little bit more difficult, but or maybe not. You can let me know. But now that it's you and your wife, do you find yourself doing that more, or do you stay on the tourist spots, or do you do both?
Both. I would say both with the kids and now on our own. So, for example, with the kids, we were following in Peru, for example. I don't know if you've been to Peru, Kurt.
I haven't, and that's a place I
Okay.
want to go because I want to go see Machu Picchu.
Okay.
Before I go.
Exactly. And there's a classic example of following the Gringo Trail.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Okay. And we followed the Gringo Trail. So for any of your listeners that are familiar with Peru at all, yes, we based ourselves in Cusco. Yes, we went to Machu Picchu. Yes, we got the bus over to Puno and Tiptato in Bolivia. And we went on Lake Titicaca. And then we went down to Arequipa and the stuff that people do. But when we were in Puno, which is just by Lake Titicaca, we got a local tour company to curate a tour just for us. Unfortunately, prices were low enough that was very affordable. And it was a two-day tour, and the afternoon and the night and the start of the morning involved a homestay. So way out on the Altiplano, small little farming community. We stayed in a hut with a farmer and his family. And they had a little girl who was the same age as our little girl. They had puppies. They had guinea pigs, which were not pets, if you know anything about what the Peruvians eat. They had alpaca, and it was a fantastic experience. So bit of that, but also we went to Machu Picchu. So yeah, I think we do the same. I think we'll do the same now. It's a bit of both. There's a
Right.
reason why people go to the money shots. It's because they are the money shots.
Right, exactly.
But but equally, I mean, I'm here in the south of France at the moment, reminding myself just how many gorgeous little towns and villages and beautiful chateaux and rivers and beaches there are that I've never heard of.
Right.
And
Yeah.
sometimes they can be more enjoyable than where the tourists are. So yeah, it's a mix.
That's the way I found Italy, like going down the coast, and they have all these little coastal villas or towns or whatever that sit right on this mountainside and the ocean's right there. And they're all beautiful, and yet you've never heard of any of these places. And it's nice to get off and experience those places for what they are, because tourists don't do that. So and so yeah, they're enjoyable, and you learn a lot about people, and it's funny how friendly people are, especially if you even try just a little bit to speak their language. They will bend over backwards for you, at least that's what I've always found.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. A little bit goes a long way. And I did languages at university. So a lot of it's gone, but there's enough there of certainly
Right.
French, Spanish, and Italian just to grease the wheels. And sometimes, I mean, so here's a story. So in Madagascar, we had a driver. We had a Toyota Land Cruiser that took us around for 10 days. There's very little transport infrastructure. And you do have to think when you're with kids about how much you're going to use the buses, because it's exhausting for them. And if you've got exhausted kids, you've got grumpy kids, and you're not having
Right.
a good time. So you have to think about these things. So before we did the year away with the kids, I spent 3 months volunteering in Sri Lanka. And I'm in a bar one night in a place called Kandy, and I'm chatting to this guy who's an English travel journalist. And I mentioned that we're going to do this year away with the kids. And it turns out his It's actually in the book wrong because I reached out to him after I wrote the book. So it's either his sister-in-law or his sister or his brother-in-law or his brother. I can't remember which, but he has a close relative who's married to a Malagasy, someone from Madagascar. So he put me in touch. Guy's got a Land Cruiser and a driver. So we from Sri Lanka, we managed to find a tour guide in Madagascar. And this guy mainly spoke something called Malagasy, which is the local language. But of course, the colonial language is French. So I'm sat with this guy day in, day out, driving around Madagascar. If I didn't have any French, I'm not sure it would have gone that well because he didn't have any English. And back in 2008, there was no thing called Google Translate.
Right. Yeah.
But I had enough. And my wife also knows a bit of French. So between us, we cobbled it together. And that absolutely greased the wheels of a journey like that. Yeah.
Well, see, it's much better that you speak the language, because when I was traveling with some friends, we didn't speak, and it's odd. You would think that would be one of the languages we spoke, at least spoke. I spoke some German, which I was back in the day was fluent enough that everybody understood me and I could, get whatever and have a casual conversation. But none of us spoke Spanish, and we were in Barcelona. And we found this girl who was a linguistics major, and we let her hang out with us because the first day there we ordered something. We ordered at a restaurant, and we had no idea what we were ordering other than it was shrimp. We knew that, and they brought out this huge pile of buttered shrimp, which was delicious. But after a while, all that butter gets in your stomach, and you're like, well. So we figured it'd be great to have her along so that we knew that we were going to eat. So.
That's a smart move. I like. I'm going to steal. That's a great idea.
It was our Google Translate from back in the day. But so like you said, technology's changed quite a bit since you first started this. But we did have camera phones back then. Have you been doing any sort of vlogging where you could actually maybe do a documentary of sorts if you wanted?
I haven't. I think people do it. I think it's good. I think for me, it's entirely personal. And maybe I'll change my mind on this. Who knows? But for me, I think there's a danger of seeing the world through a screen rather than seeing the world. So we just got back a month or so ago from a 7-week trip around Costa Rica. And right at the end of that, we did a 2-day rainforest hike through a place called Corcovado National Park. Bookends, because Corcovado is also the name of the mountain that Christ the Redeemer sits on in Rio. But anyway, we did this hike, and it was a small group. There were about 8 of us. And one of the group was a Mexican guy, early 20s, and he's a YouTuber. And he does lots of videos on YouTube of travel. And he spent the whole time looking into his camera lens.
Yeah.
And I just thought, what a shame. What a shame. You actually just, I'm not saying I didn't get my iPhone out and take some photos. Of course I did. But I was more interested in looking around and seeing what was going on.
Well, see, here's what you can do is you can always hire me and I'll do it for you. So
there's a plan.
I'll follow you around and take it all on camera for you. So in all the places that you've been, what would you say is your favorite place so far?
I get asked that question a lot. I wish I had one answer, because it's so hard to single out one country. Right. It so is. Sometimes I think about what would be the moment I would want to go back to. And it's often that rock at twilight in Madagascar. My go-to country, the country I would happily live in, is Italy. Definitely. And maybe one day we will. That's kind of part of that plan, but we'll see what happens. Right. So the best holiday I've ever had is the one I've just had, Costa Rica. There's a reason why it's at the top of so many bucket lists.
Right.
I've got a strong affinity with South Africa. I've got a strong affinity with Sri Lanka. So sorry, I'm not sure you're going to pin me down to one.
I got you.
But yeah, take me back to that place in Madagascar with my young kids, and I'd be happy.
I haven't been to South Africa yet, but I have I plan on going here very soon because I have a connection with the rhino orphanage over there, where I'm doing what I can to help them because they're I have a thing for rhinos, and they take baby rhinos that whose parent like the mother's been killed for its horn and stuff, and so it's left abandoned, or it's been attacked by hyenas or whatever, and so they take in these baby rhinos and nurse them back to health, or nurse them since they don't have a mother until they're adults, and then they release them back out onto the reserves. And so they do such great work. So why I never had a desire to go over there, but now I do. I want to go over there really bad, so I'm looking forward to that.
That's a fantastic thing to do. I mean, we volunteered at an animal rescue center in Costa Rica, and it was such an amazing experience. And funnily enough, there were two Belgian women there who had volunteered at an elephant sanctuary in Laos, which we have the details of, and they'd also volunteered at a rhino sanctuary in South Africa.
Really?
Wouldn't it be funny if it was the same one? I
Yeah,
bet
it
it
would
might
be.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when they told me how much it costs, like to feed these rhinos, because these rhinos drink so much milk, like even as babies, they drink a ton of milk, and they're just the cutest things, And I don't know, I could just talk about them all day, so I won't do that. In all the places you went, where is some place, and you may not want to say, and if you don't, that's okay, but what is one place that you said, I will never come back here?
So I found through travel that how you experience a place sometimes is impacted by, you might be able to associate with this, Kurt. It's impacted by the weather.
Yes.
It's impacted by your own mood, whether you're tired, grumpy, whatever. It's maybe impacted by other factors, like whether there's stuff going on that's great and exciting that makes it the right time to be there, or equally it's just a little bit flat, or it's in the middle of a pandemic. So lots of things can affect that. The one place that we went to in our year away and I didn't enjoy at all, and I say it with hesitation because I know people who love this place, think it's the best place on earth, right? was Singapore.
Really?
I really, really, really didn't enjoy Singapore. And I think there were two reasons for that. One is we came directly to it from 3 days, 2 nights doing a trek in the remote areas on the Thailand, Burmese or Myanmar border, a hill tribe trek, where people completely lived off subsistence and were so happy. So we came from that type of life into the dollar is everything that is Singapore.
Yeah.
Right. And the contrast just didn't sit very comfortably at the time. Possibly the other reason was it was the final leg of our Asian journey. We were 5 months in. There was maybe a little bit of fatigue combined with nervous anticipation about what was next, because we were going to get on a flight to Australia. And I think put those two things together, I wasn't in the right frame of mind to make the most of Singapore. Maybe that's the reason why I should never go back. Or maybe it's the reason why I should go back.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
I haven't been to Singapore yet. And I want to go, but they have so many rules, and which I think some of them are good. But you can be arrested for things like chewing gum and spitting it out on the sidewalk. Well, I agree you shouldn't spit your gum out on the sidewalk. I just don't know you should be arrested for it. So,
sure.
and so,
yeah.
So I've always gone, I would hate to do something and get arrested for it because I had no idea that, they're so strict about things over there that you'd be almost afraid to enjoy yourself. So.
Yeah. That's something when you're traveling in different cultures, you do have to be very cognizant of, is what are the local rules and customs. And this one's in the book. So we went to Japan, and there are a number of social etiquettes. So not things you'll get arrested for, but things that you will offend the locals if you do. And one, for example, is you're not supposed to blow your nose in public. You just have to breathe it in. It's a sign of, I don't know, whatever. But another one is you're not supposed to eat food in public other than in a designated place like a train. So you can't do what we as backpackers on a budget would sometimes do, which is make up some sandwiches and sit on a wall in a park or a bench and eat them.
Right.
So we're in Tokyo at the back of a temple, and there's a little park and there's a wall. So we're sat there and we get our sandwiches out of our bag and we start to eat them. And then a little old lady comes along and she's got a dog. Now, back then, these days, it's not uncommon to see dogs in clothes. It's quite, I'm sure,
Right.
certainly, yeah. Back then, it was quite unusual, so we were quite taken by this. So this little rat-like dog in a coat does its business on the floor, right? She gets a tissue. She picks it up, which is good, but she gets a tissue out of a bag and wipes the dog's backside.
Ugh.
So it's okay to do that, but it's not okay to eat a sandwich. It's like, come on. So, but yeah, at least, but if you get arrested for it, you definitely want to know about it when you're traveling with kids. That's for sure.
Right, definitely. Yeah. And you make a great point is you really want to know the customs of the countries that you're visiting to make sure you don't get yourself in any kind of trouble or any deep trouble, because depending on where you're at, there's it could be just a slap on the wrist or it could be jail time, and you'd like, jail time, what? It's like, it's too late. I've got to ask you this question. I'm sure you get asked this all the time, but it's always because I have a place in mind for myself, and that's why I always ask this for anybody who's ever traveled. What is the most beautiful place you've ever been to you?
I'm going to, I tell you what, if I was asked this question 10 times on 10 different days, I'd probably give 10 different answers. I have a funny feeling, right? And even as I'm formulating my answer, there's different places popping into mind. But I'm going to make you envious, and I'm going to say watching the sun rise over Machu Picchu.
Really?
It's just, I mean, you've seen the photos, you've probably seen the YouTube videos, but being there yourself and just experiencing that whole process, getting up early, queuing for the bus, getting there, going through the gates, turning the corner, it's still dark or just starting to get light, and then waiting for the sun to start to creep up and then seeing it bathe those ruins with its light. It's just magical, absolutely magical and mystical. And when you're there, you know that you're really privileged to have that opportunity. So yeah, it might be touristy, but it's absolutely beautiful.
Well, I'm glad you told me. So when I go to Machu Picchu, I will definitely make sure I can do that, because I'll have to compare it to what I think is the most beautiful place that I've experienced myself so far, and that is coming out of the Swiss Alps in Switzerland into Zurich. And it's what you just said. You've seen pictures, but pictures cannot do it justice. It just is beyond anything a picture could capture. And coming out of the Alps down into Zurich, and I remember seeing this woman. She was on the side of the lake. She was laying out, and she was in a two-piece, not a bikini, but a two-piece bathing suit, and it looked like something out of the 40s. Honest to God, you would think we're back in the 40s. It looked just like that, and it was just such a gorgeous place to be, and to see the Alps like right up front in your face. And I've been to mountainous areas that, one of my favorite places that are the Teton Mountains in Wyoming, but there's something about Zurich and the Swiss Alps that I just absolutely love. So
it's a beautiful part of the world. I've only been there once. I went 5 years ago, it'll be now. Not for tourist reasons. I went to see the Boss play in Zurich, Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was to date the last gig that him and the E Street Band have played in Europe. Hopefully not the last, but to date it's the last
Right.
one.
Wow. I would never thought to see the boss in Zurich, but I guess if you live in Europe, that he's over there too, huh?
Yeah.
Which makes me remember that one time I got to see Elton John here, but I could have seen him many years ago, back when he was in his prime, when I was in Germany and he was playing in London, and I wanted to go over, and I couldn't find, and I don't know why I didn't go by myself. I couldn't find anybody who wanted to go with me, and so I ended up missing him, when he was over in London playing. And so, but fortunately, I got to see him years later, and of course, he's still great. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I've been fortunate enough to see him a few times. Music's one of my other passions, so I'm when there are opportunities to combine the two, that's
right.
yeah, happy days.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's funny. I knew that about you because I had some lists down here, like, because of where you come from. I was gonna, it's almost like, even though you're about travel, I wanted to say, hey, what do you think about the Stones or the Who, or like, or Pink Floyd? I don't know why, but I was kind of like, I had a feeling you were a music fan. So, and
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you're pretty close to my era, so I knew you would know Pink Floyd and all those. So
Yeah, yeah. We could do a whole different podcast, I'm quite sure, but keep me on track.
yeah, exactly. Because I've been known to go off track. All right. So, what's your least beautiful place do you think that you went to that you go, it was a disappointment?
I was just writing about it yesterday, or earlier in the week. So I'm currently writing the sequel to Are We There Yet? And it's about what it's like to travel after the kids have left, and it's just the parents, in different places. And we mentioned Italy, so one of those places is Sicily. So spent about 6 weeks in Sicily last year, and we finished up in the main town in Sicily, which is a place called Palermo. And we decided, I always fancied this idea of, by the answer, I'm not going to say the answer is Palermo, by the way, if anybody's listening and thinking, what's he saying about Palermo? Palermo's lovely. But we quite like, in this new life that we've got, sometimes just kind of stopping in a place for a while. So we rented an Airbnb in the center of Palermo for a month, and it was in a building called Palazzo Sambuca. Now, if you're familiar with the drink Sambuca,
Of course, I am.
yeah, liquor, I'm sure you are. So for those who don't know, it tastes a bit like licorice, and you flame it,
Yeah.
and then take it as a shot if you're brave enough. So I've been to the town of Sambuca, right? The
Yeah.
town we went there specially. It's in Tuscany. Oh my word! It's just a little industrial plant set in the heart of a very, very ordinary, boring village. That was such a disappointment. You go to Chianti, and you're going to get the wine, and all the wonderful stuff in Tuscany in Italy. But you go to Sambuca, and it's just, why did we bother? So stick with a drink. That's what I say.
I had Sambuca once, and it was a shot. And I remember thinking, I've never drank floor wax, but if I did, I think it tastes like this. I've
Well, it's dangerous.
never had it again.
Right. Did you have a beard then? Because it could be a dangerous occupation on the upper lip.
Yeah, no, I didn't have anything. They were just like, here, have this shot. It's like,
Right.
what is it? Sambuca. Okay. It's like, oh.
Yeah. Have to try these things once.
Yeah, exactly. Once was enough for me. So you've been all around the world. Where's one place you haven't been that you really want to see more than anything else?
So we have a bucket list. And when we were in Costa Rica, which was at the top of that bucket list, it was my birthday. So one of the things we did on my birthday was we prioritized the bucket list. And when, which are the ones that, on your deathbed, you'd really go, darn it, I didn't go there. And I wish I had. And that was quite an interesting exercise, actually. There were some things that went off it, like Moscow and St. Petersburg. I thought, well, actually, probably that's not going to happen now. So they went off. There were others that stayed on it, but are just kind of nice to haves. And then there were a few that are left, and we're trying to chunk our way through those fairly quickly. one of my failings is something called FOMO. You know FOMO?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Fear of missing out. Yeah.
uh, yes, tell me, because I remember, I mean, I know that it stands for something. I just for the life of me can't think of what it stands for right now.
It stands for fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess I'm at the age where I go, oh my word, what if I got a suddenly horrible disease or cancer or whatever? So let's get on with it. So I'm always a man in a rush to tick these places off. So let me see if I can remember something. So in Europe, it's places like Norway.
Yes.
So yeah, okay, not been to Norway, so really, really want to. Turkey, I'd like to go to Cappadocia and fly in a hot air balloon over that. North America, there's actually quite a few, and we'll be hitting the road this fall for a 3-month road trip on the East Coast. So
Really?
we've never been to Canada. We've now got a place to stay when we're in Canada for a couple of nights because we met some guys from near Ontario when we were in Costa Rica. So they've offered us to stay. And I grew up in England in a town called Boston, which is where the Pilgrim Fathers sailed from to your Boston. So I've always wanted to go. So that's on the bucket list. I've always wanted to do, I don't know what you call it, but that musical triangle down in the deep South. So Nashville, Memphis, New Orleans. So
Right.
that's going to happen. I've always wanted to be in New York for Thanksgiving. So that's going to happen. So there's a few things there. There's a number of things in Asia still. Laos, the Thai Islands, Nepal, they're all on the list. Fiji Islands, quite fancy that. So listen, I will run out of places way before. So I'll run out of time way before I run out of places. Right. Way before.
Well, I think that Boston is probably my favorite city in the States. I love Boston. Wow. I've always had a great time up there. If you have a chance, go over to Martha's Vineyard, check out the little island over there. It's a little bit of a drive, but it's worth it. New York at Thanksgiving's great. Yeah, I mean that's great. And the little triangle with Memphis and Nashville and New Orleans. Yeah, those are all going to be great experiences for you. So I think
it's going to be cool. I've always wanted to go to New England in the fall as well. That's when we'll be there. So yeah. So we're going to jump in a car for 3 weeks and drive around and then drop the car off at Buffalo and do Niagara Falls and head into Canada and then fly down to DC and work our way down from there. So yeah, it's going to be great.
Well, if you get to Orlando and you want to see Disney World, let me know.
Okay.
I'm sure that's not still on your bucket list, but if you do.
Might not be this trip, but yeah, I'm sure we'll get to one day.
And something that you mentioned about meeting people and that's one of the things I think that people who don't travel don't understand is that you meet so many different people and so many cool people that it's amazing. Like like there's this friendship, this bond that you can even get from a lot of people just because you're kindred spirits, that that you travel and you have this spirit of adventure that other people don't have, and so it opens up doors for you that normally wouldn't be there for you. But so from what I can tell, that's your experience.
Yeah, it is. It's funny, isn't it? Because say we've been away for 3 months, so we've not heard a Scottish voice, and suddenly we heard one in a bar. Those people become our new best friends.
Right.
Guaranteed. Yet we'd never speak to them in Scotland. Yeah, right. We'd just be getting on with our lives. So it's funny that we as human beings, we tend to associate with people that look and sound like us. It's part of human nature. That's always been the case. So that happens when you travel. But yeah, absolutely, you get to meet all sorts of people, and that's where getting the opportunity to stay with people, stay in people's homes is fantastic. And we've done a little bit after we got back from the year away with the kids. We did a bit of couch surfing hosting. So other families came to us, and that was quite cool. I think we might do a little bit of that in reverse as we travel around. I mean, on our North American trip, so we've got these guys we met in Costa Rica from Canada. We've got family on Long Island. We've got family in South Carolina, and then some other people I know through various things in Georgia and Maryland. So yeah, that's a really good way to get underneath the skin and understand it. Because I know the States to you is just where you live, but to us it's beyond exotic. It's as exotic as Asia. You know, first time I went to LA, we've got friends in LA, and it was like I just kept looking out the car window, going, "I'm in the movies. I'm in the movies."
I look at the U.S. differently than a lot of Americans do, because I do look. It always amazes me the number of people I know who live in this country who've never been out of their state or have only been one state over. I go, that would be like living in Europe and never leaving your country when you have all these amazing countries right there that you could visit. And you're like, no, I think I'll stay home. I
you know,
don't
I sometimes I envy these people.
Yeah.
They don't have this inner restlessness to constantly go and find something new. But yeah, it's not me, that's for sure.
Right, it's not me either, and I'm glad of it, to be honest with you. All right, so tell me what one of the funniest stories that you can come up that happened in your travels.
There are in here so many, and I was asked this on an interview last week, and I came up with such a rubbish example that I
Do me better than that.
I thought it was better. So I've gone and lost the page, but let me see if I can find it. Peru. Okay, so here we are. We'll go with this one.
All right.
Okay, so we're in a place which has got it's a tourist site, and it's a giant bowl carved into the earth with a series of ridges. That's not the word I want. You go down about a meter at a time, and each level terrace. That's the word I want. Sorry,
okay.
Series of terraces. Okay, and each level was used by the Inca farmers to work out which potato, because there are a lot of different varieties of potatoes in Peru, which one grew which would grow best at which altitude. So we arrive there, and the kids, being kids, start to leap down. We're kind of puffing and panting behind, trying to keep up. And then I see Rory jump from the bottom one into the base of the bowl. So I kind of catch up, and I think this is a great photo opportunity. The kids leaping out, arms outstretched into this bowl. So I encourage them to do it. So Rory does it. Again, it's fine. Runa does it, and as she lands, as a massive scream goes out into the Andean air, and she's injured her ankle.
Ouch.
So we're about a month from the end of our year away, and I honestly thought, air rescue, and we're on a flight home, right? And then these workmen appeared from nowhere, stuck her up on their back, and took her back up to the top, to the car park, where there was a hut with a first aid kit and an accident book, which I noticed was quite full. So they couldn't do a lot. She's in massive pain. I seriously thought it was broken. And then our driver said, let's go and find a doctor. So we went to the next town, where he found a doctor who was a farmer coming back for his lunch. And we went to the doctor's surgery, which was his house. And we sat in his backyard where they were preparing lunch in a bowl. And he got out the medicine. And the medicine was something called siete hierbas, 7 herbs. Funny enough, I saw this in a market stall in Costa Rica a couple of months ago. And what they do is they beat this up with water and turn it into a paste, which can only be described as liquid excrement. I mean, that's just what it looks like. And they plastered her foot with this stuff and wrapped it in newspaper. And that was it. And the next day, we took it off, washed her foot, and she ran around like nothing had ever happened.
Wow.
Absolutely miraculous. So that's one of my toilet stories. I have others which are for different ears.
Well, then on the opposite end of that spectrum, what is one of the most harrowing stories, one of the most terrifying stories that you ran into while in your travels?
Well, terrifying, and some of the drivers that you get who observe very, very different rules and have different standards from what we have. So that's definitely a same but different. They exist everywhere, certainly in the developing world. So yeah, we've had plenty of those. But harrowing, and I guess I'm going to change the tone slightly now, would be both in Madagascar and Swaziland, where we saw populations ravaged by HIV/AIDS.
Oh wow.
And when I came to write the book, there are times when you think, this funny thing happened, am I going to be able to do it justice on page? Or is it on the page, or is it just going to be one of those things where you had to be there? When I came to writing about Swaziland, it was quite difficult. And hopefully I've captured the tone right. And so I don't know if I can quickly find it. It might be an opportunity to share some of that. Yeah, here we go. The country has one of the world's few remaining absolute monarchies. Tragically, it also has the world's highest incidence of HIV/AIDS. Over a quarter of all those aged between 15 and 49 are HIV positive. Unsurprisingly, despite the wealth of the monarchy, there are crippling levels of poverty. Heartbreaking evidence was apparent in every village and town we drove through. Piles of empty coffins stacked high, waiting for their next victim. Young children at the side of the road, desperate, gaunt, and emaciated with tiny hands outstretched. The pleading faces of two orphans as we pulled out of one beauty spot will haunt me for the rest of my days. We had nothing to help these unfortunate souls other than hard cash. On previous holidays in the developing world, we had packed simple educational gifts, such as pencils and notebooks, but this time there was not enough room in our backpacks. This is a pathetic excuse and not one I'm proud of. Our hearts ached and tears flowed.
Wow.
So that was not only hard to write, that's hard to read even now. So yeah, that was really, really harrowing. And I suspect in the intervening decade or so, things have probably got worse, not better out there.
You know, it's hard to understand why there are places like this in the world, especially now that they have HIV medication that can keep people healthy and live, you know, a long normal life. Like, why don't these people have access to that medication, especially if you have a wealthy monarchy that, you know, that that doesn't care about its people, or you know, or want to tend to its people. I don't get that.
It's, well, in the same way that the COVID vaccine has been rolled out in the Western world, and there's still
Right.
huge parts of the developing world where, you know, vaccination numbers are incredibly low. And you know, Europe, you know, traveling around Europe, it's, apart from the odd face mask, it's like nothing ever happened.
Right.
It is not like that in many other poorer places. And yeah, that's the inequality of healthcare, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
Now you mentioned both Sri Lanka and Madagascar, and so this question I had, and maybe one of these places are it, because it was my understanding that, and I don't remember if it's Madagascar or Sri Lanka, but these were kind of dangerous places to travel. Is what would you say is the most dangerous place you traveled? Would one of those be
Yeah,
it, or some? Or,
yeah, it was Sri Lanka, because when I was there for the 3 months before we went on the actual trip, doing the volunteering gig, it was the penultimate year of the Sri Lankan Civil War.
hmm,
So there was you probably heard of the Tamil Tigers. So the Tamil Tigers were fighting the majority government using terrorist tactics. And in the 3 months I was there, I think there was something like 11 fatal bomb attacks within 10 kilometers of where I was living and working.
wow.
You know, one weekend I went to a place called Anuradhapura, which is a beautiful, preserved, historic town. And there was a checkpoint every 300 or 400 meters, with young soldiers with AK-47s. I was the main road, the A7, I think, kind of cut through the town, and I was only allowed on one side of it by our Foreign Office. I'd have been validated my travel insurance if I'd crossed the road. And when I got back from that weekend, the next morning, I was sat on my bed typing my blog, and I heard boom, and just down the road, a homeless Hindu guy had picked up a bomb in a flower bed in the central reservation, which had detonated and killed him, and that was intended for the president's son on his way to school.
Oh wow!
So yeah, there was a lot happening. I was there with a few other volunteers, and we found a local driver who would take us to various places at the weekend. And one Saturday morning, we were en route to a place called Dambulla, when we were all set up with there was like a text alert system, and all our phones went off at the same time. And there'd been a massive bomb at Dambulla. So we just rerouted and went to the beach for the weekend, and I think went into the rainforest as well. So yeah, it was certainly interesting. I think it was probably in one sense more scary for my wife back home, worrying about me. And
Right.
I think I was the only volunteer that had kids actually, and I seriously considered going back at various points. But in the end, it was fine. I kind of, there were risks everywhere.
Right.
I tell the story that the summer before we went away, there was a terrorist drove a truck bomb into the check-in area at Glasgow airport, full of people going on package holidays to Spain. So these things can happen anywhere.
Yeah,
It can happen anywhere. You just have to you have to assess the risk and be sensible, but not let that stop you from traveling to places you really want to go to. Having said that, Yemen and Afghanistan, and I guess tragically the Ukraine, are not currently on my to go to list. So there are limits to that
right.
sense of adventure for sure. But Sri Lanka was certainly interesting.
You make another great point, and I think that is that this can happen anywhere. It doesn't matter where you're at, and I hear that often from people overseas that talk about coming to the United States and the gun violence that we have, and I go, I don't want to say it's because we're used to it, because I know that it's not as common as you would think. It is more so in our country than it is anywhere else in the world, but it's not like it affects every neighborhood or every city or every country or excuse me, every state to the same level that it's reported as. So there are certainly certain cities that have a much bigger problem with it than others, and so it's like you said, it just be aware of your environment, and know and just don't I always tell people, don't act like the typical tourist where people know that you're a tourist because you're just you've got a big sign on your back if you do that, and it makes you more vulnerable if people know that.
Sure, I agree. Where's the most dangerous place you've been to? We turn the tables.
I'm sorry?
Where's the most dangerous place you've traveled to, Kurt? Do you think?
I don't think I've been to a dangerous place. Because I am always aware of my environment and stuff, and I haven't I've traveled all over Europe. I've been to Southeast Asia. I've been to Central America. I haven't been anywhere in Central America where I had to worry about like if you for instance, when you talk about Rio, that's a place that I would consider that could be dangerous because of the favelas that are there, and and people, if you're wearing a nice watch, you don't want to wear a nice watch there, you don't want to wear jewelry there. So if you're aware of that, it can be safe. But if you're a tourist and you're walking out with a Rolex, you're probably not coming home with it. So it's like, and so you just have to be smart about it when you travel.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. We don't take expensive jewelry with us when we go on holiday. The engagement ring, the wedding ring, they don't go. We've got substitutes. Just sensible stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why those crooks broke into Kim Kardashian's place in France and not yours.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've realized I'm not just told the world where we keep our jewelry, so it's okay.
So what's up next for you? So you've got more travels, obviously. You got your bucket list that you want to go. Where, and I don't think you did tell me, where's the next place you're heading to on your
I'm heading to Scotland tomorrow, so that'll be a nice treat.
okay. Yeah. So
But
when you go back to when you get done with your travels and you go home, are you going, home? I'm so glad to be home.
do you know what? I think we're still working that out. I think it's going to take us a few goes at this to really get the pattern right. So this last time was pretty rubbish, really. We left Scotland in the middle of January, thinking bye winter.
Yeah.
We got back on the 8th of March and it was still winter. So that was a bit depressing. And then I got COVID. So that was a bit depressing. Right. So, we're kind of ready to go. But I've had this wonderful week in France, which has been great. The next overseas destination for us is Bulgaria, which I think will be interesting and a little bit different. So an Eastern European trip. So we've got a couple of weeks coming up in Bulgaria. Then we're going back to Sicily for a couple of weeks in June. And then July and August currently haven't got anything in them. And that's burning a hole in my soul. So something will happen, but I don't quite know what yet. But something will happen.
Maybe the Czech Republic while you're over there near Bulgaria.
No, the Czech Prague is lined up for a Christmas market trip in December. After we get back from the States. Yeah. So that's 2022 taken care of, and then get Christmas out the way, and we plan to head to Southeast Asia for 3 or 4 months to do those bucket list items that haven't been done before, and also go back to Borneo, which when you read the book you'll realize didn't go very well last time, so it's got to be done again.
Might I recommend you watch a movie called The Last Holiday? It has Queen Latifah, and it's about her. It's like at Christmas time, and she decides she's going to Prague, and I mean, it's a really great movie. It's a cute movie. I think you'd enjoy it. You might want to watch it before you go.
Okay, thank you. Will do.
Okay, well, so and you have another book you expect coming out soon.
Yeah, 2023. It's, unless this gets changed by a publisher, it's going to be called Here We Go Again. That's got Dolly Parton going in people's heads, I'm sure. And it is the story, or will be the story, of traveling without kids and what that's like, the comparisons and the differences, and some of the places that we're able to travel to. And it's about half written. And I call my holidays or my trips research trips now. So we need a few more research trips, and then I'll have enough content to get that one over the line. But in the meantime, I love talking about the family trip. It will always be part of who I am and who we are as a family. So it's a joy to share it with people, and hopefully entertain them, educate them a bit, teach them about some things about the world that they didn't know, and who knows, maybe inspire some other families somewhere to do the same one day. Wouldn't that be cool?
Would be, and I can imagine that it'll be an amazing thing for your grandkids even to read about the trips that you took with your kids, and like a mom and dad. You're going to kind of tell little stories about mom and dad in that book that they're going to go, oh, mom did that, dad did that, sort of thing.
Do you know what? Not just that, but maybe in 50 years' time, somebody will find you and me on a podcast platform and take some inspiration from the incredible wisdom we've shared today. Who knows?
We can only hope.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this, I got to say this real quick. I can tell you're a music fan because when you said "Here We Go Again," that song popped in my head, and for you to say that, I was like, yeah, he's definitely a music fan. So no Dolly Parton. Okay, well, listen, where can people find your book? Where can people reach you, and like your social media and things of that? What would do you have a website, or what do you have?
Yeah, so all of the above. So the book, are we there yet? It's on Amazon, so easy to find in the States. I think it's. I think you probably also get it in places like Barnes and Noble as well. If you want to support your local bookstore, but certainly on Amazon. There's an audio book. The website is familytrippers.co.uk, and it's available to order there. And on social, I'm on Instagram at Original Family Trippers. I can maybe let you have these for the notes at Original Family Trippers, because Family Trippers is what we called ourselves for the year. On Facebook at Ian Pilbeam Author, and on Twitter at Trippers Family. And they're all different, which is really annoying because I have to remember them.
Well,
So yeah, it'd be great to connect with people.
well, very cool. Well, it'll be very easy for our listeners and our viewers, because I'm gonna supply all those links for them, so that way they can just click on there and find you on any of your social medias, or on your website, and also where to find your book. So very good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, Ian, listen, thank you so much for this was really a fun conversation, which I knew it was going to be. When we talked the other day, I was like, oh, we're going to have a blast doing this.
It's been
So,
good. I've enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you for having me as a guest. It's
it was
been
my
good.
pleasure. Well, folks, listen, that's going to be our show for today. Thank you for joining us. And again, I'm sure you enjoyed this as much as I did, because Ian's a wonderful guy, and he's very charismatic and pleasant to be around. So I'm sure you enjoyed it. So until next time, take care, be safe, and love yourself so you can love others. Bye.